There's something about the sound of the sea that feels like home. I live on the coast and I've worked in maritime industry for over 20 years. During that time, I've seen more and more women forging their careers in everything from ports to policy, from bridge to boardroom, from fishing vessels to super yachts. But let's be honest, do we hear about those stories of success? Do we know about the challenges they face and the adventures they've experienced? Well, that's where Women in Maritime comes in. In a series of open and thought-provoking conversations, I'll be bringing you these stories and I hope you can join me. Hello, I'm Julia Gosling and welcome to Women in Maritime. I'm so happy today. I have Margareta Jensen Dickson and she is Director of People, Brand and Crewing at Stena. And I know that you've also been playing a really key role in shaping the way that Stena attracts and cares for its workforce because you've been driving efforts for gender equality and inclusion. So thank you. It's really interesting to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Now, you've got a very big role at Stena, Director of People and Communication and Brand and Crewing. Now, do we want to start off, just give me an idea of the role you've got and the size of Stena? It's a well-established company with a lot of heritage.
Yeah. So we always say that we're a European company. We're based in the north of Europe. It's a Swedish company with the head office is in Gothenburg on the west coast of Sweden. But our biggest region is actually the Irish Sea. So we have a lot of business in the UK of various form. So Stena Line, all in all, has got 40 vessels, and we also owe, I think it's around 9 ports now, because we acquired one last week. And most of them are in the UK, but it's also in the Baltics and in Sweden, basically. All in all, we have around 7,700 people that works for us. Of course, there's a lot of temps as well that's included in that, but that's sort of what it looks like.
Yeah, and you also carry a lot of passengers, don't you, as well as the freight?
Yeah. No, the business model is basically based on freight, which I would say is probably around 60%. It depends on which routes we talk about, but it's freight and then it's the passengers, the travel segment. So the business model is basically that we have got RoPax ferries.
Yeah, and I think it's information on your website, but 7.6 million passengers a year. So, yeah, and something like 2.1 million cars, vehicles. So,
no, it's a huge operation. It's 24/7, 365 days a year. So always something going on. And also in the field that I represent, there's always something.
Yeah, I bet there is. Yeah. So, you're a senior leader in maritime now. I'd love to know a bit about your journey and how you came into maritime.
Well, I graduated from university in the early 1990s now, and then I went in because then I did finance and economics. But I've always been quite an outgoing person, so I find it a bit boring to just work with numbers. So then I sort of applied for roles within HR, and I came in. I worked for one of the Swedish paper mills companies, and then I went from there to more HR-related roles within the hospitality industry, within retail. And then there was a big transformation going on with the Swedish airports. That was basically, it was taken they were privatized. And then I was part of that change journey that was tremendously difficult. And during that change journey, I came across with a number of people, because there was a lot of people that were brought in to the aviation and to the local airports and so on that came from the maritime industry and came from Stena. And quite a number of them said to me that, you've got the personality that would fit perfectly within Stena, because we all have got this sort of entrepreneurial spirit. So then there was a vacant position where I was approached by a headhunter, and that is coming up to 12 years this year. Mm-hmm. And then I started off there, where I was responsible for the HR operation in Scandinavian countries, and then the role just grew, and I grew with it. And then 5 years ago, I got the opportunity to join the board. And then I first had responsibility for people and HR delivery, and then brand, crewing and communication was added on top of it.
You didn't start off with the aim of going into maritime. That came along for you.
Yeah.
Obviously, maritime world is quite male dominated. I mean, I also thought I might have been working on ships, on research ships or science ships in the mid 1990s. At that point, there was only, 2% of women at sea. That's the same now. And likewise, even on shore, the maritime world is quite male dominated. How did you find that? And can you remember some of the challenges that you faced coming into that very male world in shipping?
I suppose it's different. And also, for example, aviation and airports is much better gender balance, I would say. And there's a lot of women working in that industry. Retail is the same. And also hospitality, of course, there's more women than men that works there. But I think when I started, I didn't reflect that much of it. And I suppose also I'm brought up in a family company with my granddad and his 4 sons, and I was, among the cousins, I was the only girl. And so I was quite used to being in male-oriented environments. But then, of course, the longer I worked, the more you realize that it was more about the diversity, that everyone was quite alike. They had the same background, they all served the sea, they came ashore. It was a lot of relationships, people knew each other, and then they had skills that just came from the maritime sector. And I suppose my experience then from other industries where you could see that there was actually good to sort of steal ideas and thoughts and ways of working from other industries was something good that you could leverage from. So I think that was our take on it. Let's change it. So we wanted to do the entire sort of diversity change, but then we were advised that, no, just start to fix the gender balance. So that's how it all started. Back in I think it was 2017 we started this journey.
I suppose you have been the only woman in the room, though, at times, especially in a senior role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And you do get used to it. Of course you do. And after a while, you don't always notice, but it can be quite challenging at times, can't it? I'm interested in the role that Stena is playing in pushing diversity and inclusion. Now, if you look at what's happening around the world, in the US, for example, I've been reading that, over half the companies there have dropped or reduced all of their sort of EDI initiatives, but that's not seeming to happen in Europe or the UK. Is that just good business because we can see that it's better to have these policies, or is this something to do with Swedish ownership and having a different culture? I'm really interested.
It's a very good question. I do definitely think it's good business. I think diversity, inclusion is good for the business because it's better, sort of reflects the world around us, definitely. And yes, of course, the Swedish heritage is part of it, but I think it's rather the culture and the values that we stand for. When in Stena we have, our owner has written a book that's called The White Book, which is basically how we should treat people, but also customers. And this is what it's all about. So the values are very sort of embedded in the company. It goes also back that our owner and that his family comes from the archipelago of Gothenburg. It's a small island outside there where it was very much a lot of fishermen lived there, and it was all about taking care of each other and making sure that, and that was basically because when people went at sea or the men went at sea, something could happen to them and they could lose their lives and stuff because it was a dangerous business. So you had that sort of embedded in the way things were done out at Dunse, where it comes from. So I suppose that culture is so strong and so embedded in the company's history. So I think that is part of it, the care part, but it's also the kindness part. You can be strict and you can be quite forceful in many ways, but you can do it with kindness as well. And I suppose also when it comes to Sweden has since just shortly after the Second World War, been quite a country that has been quite well off in many ways. So we have had that sort of social security network and, childcare and everything. So it's been possible for women to work, and you never end up in the same discussion that you maybe do in the UK. That is it really worth the money that we get someone to look after the children? Maybe it's better that I stay at home and so on. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. But I definitely think that it's also you need to stand up for what you believe in. And especially in times like this, you need to be bold and show some, courage in it.
That's a very authentic place to come from, rather than just ticking a box on a policy. I think also it's interesting what you alluded to there about building teams and, that it is good business practice, because do we want teams that are just made up of all the same people who think the same way and act the same? It doesn't give you that extra bonus, does it? So
diversity is its an ability to solve problems. It's in people's minds, and that you can be brought up in the same environment, gone to the same schools and so on, and still you solve things differently. So of course there can be various forms of diversity, but I do think that what I can see is that we've had a change, that we have more of a European presence and we have different nationalities that represent us. We have the gender, that both men and women are present at management positions and so on. And of course that changed the dialogue. It's changed the way we do business. So I see it as just a good thing.
Okay. And what, in practical terms, Stena have some targets for diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. I think the key thing is that you need to have the top as ambassadors. And we have a very committed CEO in Niklas Mortensson. For him, this is crucial. He has led the way to show the way by having a management team that has been 50% women, 50% men. For him, it's crucial that we follow up. So we make sure we measure every year the KPIs we have for that. And that our ambition is that we should have 30%. By 2030, we should have 30% women on managerial positions. But we should also try to have a workforce that consists of 30% women, but the thing is that, because I always say, deck and engine working on board the vessels is never going to happen, probably not by 2030. But we measure the entire companies, and there is areas where you actually can do a lot by encouraging women to apply and trying to find women to certain roles. Freight, for example, or freight manager positions, or port manager positions, safety management, and so on. So there's plenty of roles where there is actually women around.
Yeah, that's great. So policy-wise, you've got some actual practical policies in place to support women and to help them into the workforce, as well as hopefully retaining them.
Yeah, no, we have policy, but I don't think that's... I think where the magic happens is when we have the male ambassadors, and also that we have an environment where we have psychological safety, where people can be a true self, because it's not just about men and women. It's to be able to create, as a company, we can create an environment where people can be their true self, and it's okay to speak up, and it's okay to have different opinions and so on.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
You can have tons of policies. I've seen this elsewhere. You have policies, but it doesn't happen anywhere. So it's probably this, that action speaks louder than words. You really need to make a change.
That's really interesting. That psychological safety, a lot of that comes from leadership, doesn't it? Yeah. From if it's people working at sea, it's the captain, it's master, the senior crew. In sort of maritime law and legislation, there isn't a whole lot on leadership that you have to achieve. So do you invest in anything extra in terms of training?
Oh, absolutely. We have compulsory trainings. We have something called License to Lead, which is our own leadership training that is sort of compulsory for all the managers. And then, so the last couple of years, we've done it for all managers, supervisors, leaders that we have within the ports. around the country. This year we will start and make sure that everyone has done it also that work in management positions at sea. So I think, I don't think we, or I know so, we don't differentiate between sea and shore. So we haven't got like a maritime HR department and a shore HR department, which I know is quite common. We see everyone as an employee for Stena Line, and we treat people in the same way, and we educate them in the same way. So if you work in finance, or if you work in onboard sales and services on board our vessels, or if you work in the deck and engine department, you still should attend the same training in leadership, and you're still part of a management team. So I think that's the difference that we have. We see the vessels as they have key positions, which is, of course, the senior masters, it's the senior engineer, but it's also the onboard sales and service manager that's there.
Yeah, that's so critical, isn't it? Investing in people, you know, because not everybody's born a great leader, are they? But we can all learn to be better at it, can't we?
Exactly.
Yeah, that sounds like a good program. So I'm wondering about you, Margareta, and your journey. You're a mum. Mm-hmm. How have you managed that balance? Because obviously at a senior level, you know, I know there's a lot of long hours required. There's travel. Has that been a challenge at all for you?
Yeah, I'm actually a mother of 3. So, and it's not always been easy, but I think that's the beauty of, I've lived most of my life with the children, at least in Sweden, where there is quite a good network, and, you know, the entire social security system is there, and you're allowed to stay at home for 18 months when you have children, and you get basically 80% of the salary and so on. But of course you need to have an understanding husband. My husband is Scottish, so he has had a strong mother that has worked, so I suppose. And we've had quite honest discussions that, okay, this isn't, because I need to travel. I travel a lot. I probably spend a lot of, you know, I probably spend as much time in the UK as I do in Sweden. So I travel. And then you need to have that understanding. And I think also as a mother, it's so easy to, you have to stand up for the choices you make, because of course I've got a network of friends and so on that's chosen a different career, and they have been present at the school gates, have been present, and I haven't. And it's a choice that I've made. And I don't think I would have done it differently. I wouldn't, because I've enjoyed myself. But it's not easy, no.
No, but you know, those other mums are really good, because they're the ones that can tell you what's happening tomorrow when you absolutely didn't read anything from the school. And you have to have those good mums in your network to say, oh, yeah, you know, you've got to have all the stuff for the play tomorrow and 15 other things, because, you know, you haven't even looked at the stuff from the school. So
No, exactly. No, but that's me. And also, you know, at home and stuff, I had an example yesterday. I came home from England really late last night, and my husband is away. He's in Stockholm all day, and I was just like, okay, he's changed the beds and they don't match, and I was like, just leave it. Things like that. You just have to let go, leave it.
Yes, exactly. You have to let them do it their own way and be grateful. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there's always challenges with that, isn't there? We're trying to manage the balance between them. What about looking at your journey through Maritime? You're now very senior in leadership. Have you got any advice if you went back to talk to the 20-year-old Margareta?
Patient. And that is the same that I would advise myself. No, but it is about patient, because, and then also not be too hard on yourself. I think women in general, and especially women in the maritime industry, it's tough. It's very tough. And you need to be patient, because change doesn't happen overnight. And when I was younger, it was easy to say, okay, then I've had it and I'll leave. But I've seen that by staying on, good things has come out of it. So that is something that, you know, to be a bit more patient and also be a bit kinder to yourself. But I think in general, advice is about, you have to deliver what you've promised. So delivering it, because if you don't deliver and get the results, then you won't have the progress. That's the key.
And patience, I suppose, is also, it's difficult when you're younger because, yeah, you can get frustrated that things aren't happening that you want. But then you get a huge satisfaction actually achieving goals, don't you?
Yeah,
so
you do. You do.
I get that. Yeah. And what about, can you think, because I'm thinking like a couple of quick fire questions that might be fun to ask you. Can you tell me about perhaps your best day at work, something really good that's happened?
Oh, something really good. There's happening good things all the time within Stena. It's never a dull moment. I used to have a colleague that worked together with me, and he worked in Holland, in Hoek van Holland, and he always said there's never a dull moment in Stena Line. And that's true. There's never a dull moment. There's always things happening.
Have you ever launched a ship?
Oh, yeah. We had a christening of 2 vessels last year, so I went to China for a christening, and then we had the second one in Belfast. So that was in October, and then I think the Belfast was one in November, and then we've had christenings in Poland, a couple of them as well. So, yeah.
And is there a different ceremony in different countries?
Yes.
Because don't we used to throw a bottle at the hull?
Yeah.
What happens?
Yeah, they are different, but they're lovely. They're really nice. And it's nice to sort of keep the old tradition and everything that comes with that. So, no, but Stena is and I think that shipping in general is such a fun world to be in, but it's difficult to plan because you never know what comes around the corner. Also, in our company, there's, as I said, we've just acquired a port in Latvia. And we have acquired a shipping company in Finland called Vasa Line that we're now introducing into the system. And then there's more exciting things coming up. So it's never a dull moment. So it's difficult to, have a perfect day.
Yes, but sometimes I think I agree with you about something different happening all the time. And that's the thing that keeps us in maritime, I feel. I worked in the Maritime Coast Guard Agency in the UK for 18 years. Yeah. And so we covered everything in maritime. But even after all that time, I was still learning new stuff all the time, because there's just so much always to learn in maritime.
It's incredible. I don't think there is any industry that is like this. And also that you have the global perspective. Even if you work in one country, you still have this sort of much bigger perspective.
Yes. And of course, there's a lot of change coming that the maritime industry is having to absorb now. So sort of decarbonisation in shipping, looking at green fuels, technology. So the learning and the sort of adaptation and change doesn't actually stop, does it? No. So I think the industry will change and is changing, and especially with new builds and new ships that comes in as well. That will require different skills. Yes, and the decarbonisation and trying to sort of decide what shipping companies use. I mean, that's a real long-term investment decision, isn't it? Because, you could be ordering your ships years in advance of them actually coming into operation.
Absolutely, and no one really knows what the solution is.
Yes, that is part of the problem. What do you invest in if you're not quite sure what you're going to want in 10 years?
Because that can be costly investments.
Yeah, we might have to do another episode on that one. Yes. Now, not everyone wants to answer this, so only answer if you want to. But can you think of a time when you failed at something and what you learned from it?
Oh, I've failed so many times. And I think that's the beauty, because when you fail, that's actually, you learn a lot. But I think I've got one example, and that is sometimes in my role, and this is more the professional HR role, you have to do quite difficult tasks where you are supporting a senior manager in a role. And I was advised to do something, and I could feel and I could sense this is not the way I would do it. I would do it like that. But then I wasn't mature enough. I wasn't senior enough. I suppose that also comes the more when you're promoted, and when you're promoted to board, all of a sudden you have the trust and you dare to speak up. But then I was further down in the world. So I didn't say that I thought that was wrong. And then there was so much problems that came up and so many issues. And I was like, I knew it. I knew that this would happen, but I didn't speak up. And that's something.
Yeah, your instincts had told you.
Yeah, my instincts was that. So I think that's something that I've learned, that no, listen to your instinct, because my instinct has sort of navigated to where I am today, and trust it and dare to speak up. And I think that goes back also when you sit in a room, because they were all men. That's that. And then you felt like, no, but they know more than I do. And then you realise, no, they didn't. But so that,
no, they just say more than you do. That's a good example in learning to trust yourself more as you mature. What about any hopes for the future then? If we're looking at, women working in maritime and hopefully perhaps encouraging more women to consider it as a career, what hopes do you have for the future, and what might need to change?
Now, my hope for the future is that I've reached that age now where I'm happy where I am, and I want to sort of empower the younger women that comes into the workforce and help them to navigate in this environment. And I take a lot of pleasure, and it's not just women, it's young men as well that I want to guide and support and, help them to navigate through the system. So that's something I take a lot of pleasure out of. But I also, I think, well, if we go back when we went to university, and I really thought, if I saw myself in the future plus 50, that, the world would have changed. So I thought that it would have, the world would be so much more different, and this with equality and stuff would be something that was just there. And I'm a bit disappointed that more hasn't happened during those 30, 40 years.
Yes. Well, it's, in actual, if you look at the hard numbers, not talking necessarily about Stena and your staffing, but overall in maritime, it still hasn't really changed since the 1990s.
No. And then if you compare that, because I've stolen a lot of thoughts and ideas from the tech world, the digital world, and this with psychological safety comes from there. But I think also because they had the same challenges, the finance sector had the same challenges as us, but they have managed to change it. So I think we need to, keep going.
It's a good tactic as well to look at what's worked elsewhere, because the tech sector had to really look at themselves and think, gosh, we're 97% male. What are we missing here?
Exactly.
And that has begun, or has changed quite significantly. That's an interesting perspective. One last thing I thought I'd ask you about, because you actually have this role of brand and communications as well. I mean, women in communications actually, when I've worked in that for a long time, and that's quite well populated with women. But it's great that you're also at director level, because so often communications and marketing doesn't necessarily get in at board level.
No.
Whereas you're right in there and you can bring that to the forefront.
Yeah. And I think it's so today, communication and the people perspective is so interlinked. Because I think it's our people that's the ambassadors of the company. If they speak well about us, then we will have a good brand as well. And it's the same as our customers is our ambassadors as well, but they are so heavily interlinked.
Yeah, and also the reputation of the company, as you say, is tied up with
the entire
the way that
brand.
you treat people.
Absolutely.
And customers.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's interesting. Well, look, I think we've had loads to talk about. I think we could keep talking a lot longer, but I know that we can't, sadly. We might have to do another one in the future. Thank you so much, Margareta, for joining me. I found this really interesting, talking to you for Women in Maritime.
Thank you.
If your brand belongs in the heart of the yachting world, this is where it happens. Yachting International Radio reaches over 1 million yachting professionals and enthusiasts every month, with 77 million impressions, 220,000 social followers, and 74,000 podcast subscribers. Our hosts are insiders, crew, captains, CEOs, trusted voices shaping the industry. This is targeted, high-impact advertising in a luxury niche. Visit yachtinginternationalradio.com/advertise. Your audience is already listening.